alright, I've come a long way. I've come from over yonder to do justice for my boy Hassan since the anime decided to end this man's whole career. So, Hassan Sabah, also known as Gramps, was said to have been born in the city of Ham, Iran, in the 11th century. Following his birth, his family dipped over to the city of Ray, where he would spend the majority of his youth. Now, when it comes to Hassan, he had a religious family. They were Islamic, and his father was heavily influenced by the 12er branch in Islam. Naturally, Hassan wanted to follow in his father's footsteps. So as he grew older, he became a lot more involved with the Islamic word, to the point where it was one of the only things that mattered. The friction comes in when you consider the location that Hassan's family moved to. For a while, the city of Ray was a playground for the Ismailis. The Ismailis were a different branch from the 12ers, which is the branch that Hassan grew up on. The main difference being that each branch believed in a different spiritual leader after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. While he was still living in Ray, Hassan met up with Amira, who was said to have been looking for people to convert to the Ismaili branch at the time. Up until this point, Hassan had stuck with his father's beliefs because he felt that it was the right thing to do. But the more that he hung around Amira, he started to realize, hey, this dude might actually know what he's talking about, and I just may have been boxing myself in. He researched and he researched. The two went back and forth in several debates, and after a while, he decided to take Amira's advice and open up his mind to new ideas. By this time, Hassan had been struck by a severe illness, and since knowledge was a very important thing for him, he figured that he should at least try to obtain true wisdom before his death. At the age of 17, Hassan swore allegiance to a Shia Ismaili leader and converted to the Ismaili sect. The sect itself is based on a hierarchy. You have the foot soldier, the deputy, and finally, the missionary. The missionary for their region was so impressed by Hassan's devotion that he promoted him to a deputy right off the bat. He then told Hassan that he should visit the spiritual leader Al-Mustansir over in Cairo, Egypt. He made his way to Egypt, generally staying there for about 3 years, and became a full missionary. Now, when Hassan met Mustansir, the leader told him up front that he wanted his own son to be his successor. The guy that was supposed to be Mustansir's right hand, his vizier, was peeping game the whole time. He had other plans once Mustansir dropped his guard. Knowing that Hassan was gaining good favor with not only their leader, but also the entire Ismaili community, the vizier started to take Hassan as a threat. He knew that he had to get him out the way. Truth be told, the vizier actually wanted his son to be the successor. Once he did have the chance, he had Mustansir's son executed. He had Hassan kicked out of Cairo altogether, and he even had him in prison to ensure that he couldn't interfere with his plans. All the odds must have been in Hassan's favor because the walls of the place where he was being held captive started to collapse, which gave him the opportunity for his escape. Now, although Hassan was able to catch a break with him busting out of captivity and all, the vizier was still on his head. My guy was out here on the run, even on the verge of death. The only thing that this dude could think of was, okay, how could I convert more people to the Ismaili branch? During this time, the Seljuks were the ruling military family of this area, but that didn't scare Hassan. He told himself, I bet I could take them on if I just had access to the resources. In Elburz Mountains, there was a fortress that caught Hassan's eye that he believed could serve as his main headquarters, Alamut Castle. He was well aware that there were some fellow Shia Muslims positioned outside the castle, and they would do a great deal of help if he could get them on his side. What's even better for his situation is that these locals didn't mess with the Seljuks, since, among other things, they were dishing out heavy taxes and crazy policies on their people. An uprising was right up their alley. Hassan then tells his current followers to go through the valleys and convert the nearby locals to the Ismaili faith. In the meantime, in order to keep his cover under wraps, he disguised himself as a school teacher until he knew that there were enough men around, or at least inside, for him to begin his takeover. Once he was on the inside, Hassan befriended as many soldiers as he possibly could, but still maintained enough distance to ensure that the Lord didn't get any ideas. Clearly, this man was putting that presence concealment to work. While the castle lord was out on one of his runs, word got back to him from the Seljuk ruler Maliksha that Hassan was hiding somewhere in this area, and the vizier wanted his arrest expeditiously. The lord gets back to his castle and he notices that most of his guards have been swapped out for new ones. This looks kind of shaky. So he pulls his right-hand man to the side and he says, "Hey, you mind explaining to me what the fuck is going on?" And his deputy tells him, "Oh, well, you know, a bunch of people got sick while you were gone, all at one time." And a lot of the laborers from the nearby villages were willing to take their place. At that very moment, Hassan waltzes up to the Lord and says, "Oh, hey, you're back. Yeah, this castle, it's mine now." So the guy starts freaking out. "What? Your castle? Man, if y'all don't get this, arrest this man." Nobody busts a move. Nobody. Dude starts to look around in circles and he finally starts to understand what's going on. Sir, did you miss the part when I said that this is my castle?" Now, you would think that Hassan would take this dude out right then and there, but he actually let him go free. He compensated him for his loss and told him to hit the road. Now that Hassan was the new ruler of Alamut, he started to suit up his fortress with better fortifications. He made adjustments to the irrigation system for better production, better storerooms for their provisions. He even constructed a famous library that contained a vast amount of information for scholars all over. Now that Hassan's been making all these moves, word gets back to the Seljuks and they're not really feeling it. So the Seljuks send out a messenger to tell Hassan, "We see you taking over the castle, and that's cool and all, but we run this region, so I'm gonna need you to take the knee." Hassan told the messenger, "You tell your ruler to go on about his business before we have to put them hands on him." So for a while, they did just that. They didn't bother him, but soon enough, boom, Alamut was being raided at the instruction of the Seljuks. They besieged the castle, made attempts to ruin their lands, and axed a good portion of Hassan's people. This made a lot of his followers begin to second guess their choice. But Hassan told them, "What? You think we about to throw in the towel, baby? We just getting warmed up." His men held out, and the governor that was enforcing the siege ended up passing away. Hearing this news, the Sultan, Maliksha, tried to put them under siege once more, but he ended up dying shortly after. And his vizier, well, let's just say that his vizier came up missing at the hands of Hassan's assassins. They real life put this man on a milk carton. Bruh. Now that the Seljuks didn't have a leader, their people spiraled out of control. They went into an internal dispute for nearly a decade, which gave Hassan plenty of time to get his castle and his forces back into shape. By this point in time, Hassan had established his very own independent territory, the Nazari state, a state that later boasted several strongholds, forts, and fortresses like Lamsar Castle. The reason why he ended up going with the name Nazari in the first place goes back to his spiritual leader's son, Nazari. Back when Mustancer's vizier had Nazari executed, there was a lot of inner turmoil that erupted among the Ismailis. The vizier assumed that since he was able to get Nazari out the picture, everyone would just support him and come over to his side by default. Didn't quite work out that way. Hassan said, "That's not the person I signed up to support, so I'm not rocking with y'all no more. I'm out." This decision, of course, being coupled by what his people thought would be best. Now, the Nazari sect, Hassan's newly established group, created in Nazari's name, were on their own, even amongst the people in their own branch. The fight for power was serious out here, my guy. The Nazaris were also known to be the Order of Assassins, who are in fact the modern day origin of where assassinations came from. Assassins were synonymous with the term fedayeen, which basically meant that you were willing to sacrifice yourself at any time, at any place, for the greater cause, if that's what it took. If Hassan believed that his enemy's forces were superior, he would send out orders to his strongholds to pinch off their leaders in order to make their forces dissolve one at a time. Get rid of the head and everything else will fall apart. Now that a decade has passed, Muhammad Tapar was the new sultan, and he focused his attention directly on Alamut. The siege, once again, was crucial. It had gotten so bad that he had to get all the women and children out of there. They cut off the access to his resources, and all of his men were down to eating a piece of bread and 3 walnuts each. By the good grace of Allah, the Sultan had once again passed away. Hassan gets his castle back up again, and the Seljuks go back into an internal struggle. What's impressive about his ascension is that although Hassan was getting some help from some allied forces, the Seljuks were very well trained and were far larger in terms of numbers. Hassan's men, on the other hand, were just getting their feet wet and still was able to hold them off. The new Seljuk ruler decided that he wanted to press the issue with Hassan one last time. At this point, Hassan is like, "Alright man, you guys are starting to get annoying. Let's just call it even." But the ruler didn't want to back down. So Hassan sent out a warning. Infiltrating the ruler's own chamber, Hassan had one of his men place a dagger at the side of his bed with a message. Here's what it said. "Look, I like you. I really do. And we could have easily put this dagger straight through your chest. But I'm feeling generous. If you want to keep it that way, stop with the goddamn sieges. Or else. Gracias." The ruler was so spooked that he told all of his people, "Hey, leave that dude alone, man. This dude is out here like John Wick. It ain't even worth it." They drew up the treaty and everything was all good. For 35 years, all the way up until his death, Hassan spent his days at the fortress of Alamut, never coming down for any reason whatsoever. And they still couldn't kill him. He appointed his next successor that would carry on the title and the legacy of the old man of the mountain, and he passed away. This is how we were able to get the 19 different descendants of Hassan in the Fate franchise. During his life, Hassan was cutthroat in terms of being pious. He pulled punches for nobody. When he even assumed that his 2 sons had broke their vows in terms of their faith, he had them executed in a heartbeat. One for the speculation of murder and the other for the speculation of drinking alcohol, which some people view as a taboo in the Quran. Furthermore, the title Old Man of the Mountain is an interpretation that comes from the European explorer Marco Polo. Basically, Marco played a huge role in terms of painting the narrative on how the people of the West viewed Hassan in the first place. He described Hassan to be just some charlatan that tricked young men into his sect, but it wasn't that simple. The word assassin itself comes from the term hashish, the same drug that Hassan was accused of using on his initiates to give them a glimpse of paradise. Upon their awakening, they would witness the Garden of Alamut, where they'd be fed the best foods, fountains of honey and wine pouring out all over the place, and a buffet of virgins ready to be piped out whenever they wanted. The initiate was then told all of this could be yours if you serve the Order of Assassins. In actuality, this idea was seen more as a spiritual take than a physical one, since getting access to these items would be pretty not feasible at all. Not to mention that it was clearly misinformation spread by Hassan's enemies to tarnish his name. As of today, Hassan's commitment has earned him a role in Fate Grand Order as Tsiah, a king that survived the flood in the Sumerian myth. The story goes that when the gods came through with the flood, Enki respected Tsiah's commitment so much that he revealed that the flood was coming, which gave him enough time to prepare. Putting it into simpler words, Tsiah is basically the Sumerian equivalent to the hero Noah from the Testament and Utnapishtim from the Epic of Gilgamesh. And what better equivalent to make him in these times than the men I mentioned before. In the story, he gives us guidance over the course of the singularity on how to approach our future battles. Now, something cool that I noticed about his position is that at the end of the disaster, Tsiah was rewarded by the gods with immortality. This is a pretty big deal if you look at the character of Hassan. It's almost as if he was deified in the same manner. He lived a certain way during his lifetime, and through fate, going beyond his original lore, he was rewarded with being the Grand Assassin, the greatest of all the assassins in the franchise, and he was given the ability to strike death into all things, no matter what that may be. Let me know what you guys think. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Follow me on Twitter for updates on the channel, and I will be back with more Tight Moon content. It is your